To discuss this further, Dan Perry is joining us. He's a former editor-in-chief at the Associate Press in Europe, West Asia and Africa region, who's joining us from Tel Aviv. Dan, thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure, as always, to speak with you. Now, Iran is calling for its new arrangements for the Strait of Hormuz irreversible. Does this suggest that Iran is trying to turn a temporary measure into a permanent shift in control over one of the world's most important waterways, as they also warn the US with it?
Yes, it does suggest that. But it suggests ever so much more. It also suggests that the Iranians really do believe that they have all the leverage, because if they are presenting a situation so extreme, if they are being quite so brazen, if they are ignoring so totally the fact that they are a military mismatch for the US, they must have concluded that the US really is not prepared to punish them for this. Perhaps they believe that the US has run out of interceptors. Perhaps they believe that Trump is going to be cowed by public opinion in America, where he has failed to sell the war and the war is unpopular. I cannot say for sure, and honestly, no one knows for sure. Very few people, if any, on the outside of Iran can really tell what the thinking is there. And of course, part of the equation is that the Iranians, really, in a sort of global, historic, cultural way, are very proud of what great negotiators there are. And so, of course, it could be said that all of this is for public consumption and it's all just positioning and posturing. And in the end, they'll be more reasonable. But they're pushing the envelope pretty far. And it really does look like they're inviting the maximal wrath of their opponents in a gamble that their opponents, in fact, cannot follow through. So I honestly can't tell which way it's going to go. But they're flirting with something potentially catastrophic for them, because at the end of the day, they are aligned against most of the world community. Certainly the West and the Arab League and Africa and much of Asia. Maybe China really wants to help them still, potentially North Korea, maybe Russia. But the rest of the world obviously knows this is a criminal regime that has gone too far. So maybe in the end, the gamble will have paid off, and it'll turn out that the world blinks. But it might be otherwise. Now, what would it look like if it was otherwise? My sense is it would look like a complete and total land, air, and sea blockade of Iran. Perhaps the Americans buy time, tread water until the midterms, after which Trump will have greater freedom of movement. But after that, I think all bets are off.
And what are the consequences if the standoff continues, would you say? Could prolonged restrictions on Hormuz force the US and its allies into a difficult choice between accepting Iran's new maritime rules and taking action that risks a much wider regional confrontation?
Accepting Iran's new maritime rules is bigger than just accepting maritime rules. It would be a capitulation to an inferior power that is a negative player and a bad faith actor on a stage of history. They can't do that. The Iranians may not understand. I suppose fanaticism and jihadism enables a version of clarity where life is black and white and you're willing to sacrifice your existence for some ideal, maybe. But it might also blind you to the fact that in the rational Euclidean universe, there are shades of gray. And there's a point where, even though, yes, Western society's rational civilizations will compromise to a degree, you can push them too far. So yeah, that's the choice the West faces. Again, as I said before, I cannot predict which way it's going to go. But my sense is the Iranians are pushing things a bit too far, unless at the last minute they take their foot off the pedal and they let go of the Hormuz outrage, and then they might emerge victorious, because it really does seem to me like it's actually true that Trump regrets having entered this misadventure. And if the Hormuz thing is put aside, which the West cannot accept and should not accept, but if it is, then Iran will get away with a lot. Specifically, um, a minor deal on the nuclear program, nothing asked of them on the missiles and on the terrorist militias around the region, and not even the shade of a shadow of a promise that they will not massacre future protesters. Incredible. So that's a big win for Iran. They are currently refusing to take yes for an answer, which is astonishing. But if in the end it turns out that what's actually happening is, brinksmanship and negotiation, and they pull back from the Hormuz insanity, then yeah, they stand to gain a lot. The regime, not the people of Iran. The people of Iran will have lost, but the regime will have been strengthened, I fear.
Now, JD Vance says Iran has now ruled out charging ships on the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says Hormuz will remain closed until the US ends the war. Does that indicate that Iran is genuinely looking, do you think, for a negotiating exit, or simply removing one obstacle while maintaining pressure on the US?
Well, for that to indicate what you suggest would mean that I believe Vance more than I believe Iran, and sadly, I don't. I wish I did. And Iran is obviously not credible, and the Iranian regime are not truth tellers, but neither is the American regime. And so at the end of the day, I think we have to conclude that in the middle of very delicate and high stakes negotiations, whatever officials say in public is not necessarily something you can count on. And that's kind of where we are. The Iranians are not currently acting like what J.D. Vance said is true. And the American government has repeatedly, in the course of these years of war, made claims on behalf of jihadists that turned out to be untrue. Trump would have had you believe in September of 2025 that Hamas agreed to disarm in Gaza. There was a 21-point plan, and the key point was that Hamas agrees to disarm. And Trump said they did, and Hamas said nothing, and they didn't. So I don't believe anything said in public right now. What I'm observing is that the Iranians are pushing the envelope very far. Uh, if I had to guess, I'd say they'll back off before they force the world to like do maximal war against them. But I can't fully tell because the Iranian regime makes a pretty convincing pretense of being maniacal, suicidal jihadists. Hamas is that way. Hezbollah is that way. They're not kidding around. I mean, they're happy to die. And the head of the snake, or the head of the octopus, as some people prefer the analogy, is in Tehran. It's conceivable that they're the same, and they're happy to go down with the ship, and they don't mind what the damage is to the civilian population of Iran. And I think to a degree greater than what the Israelis did in Gaza, the Americans don't want to harm the civilian population of Iran. But there's a point where they may conclude that the less bad option is to go ahead and bring down the regime at whatever cost turns out to be necessary. And that could involve significant harm to energy infrastructure, to other civilian infrastructure, and of course, in general, to civilian lives, what they call collateral damage. It would be a horrible tragedy and potentially a humanitarian catastrophe. And I know so many people in the Iranian opposition who would like for the regime to be brought down without that type of a cost, of course. But there's a point where you run out of options. It really is sad.
Now, after months of relative calm, what does Yemen launching a major offensive against the Houthis signal about the stability of the country's fragile front lines at the minute? As the government says the operation is a response to intensified Houthi missiles and drone attacks within these regions.
You have to be realistic. The recognized government of Yemen, putting aside the fact that it's not a democratically elected government, but it is recognized, and to a degree, it certainly has greater legitimacy than the Houthi operation. They've proven very inadequate in fighting the Houthis over 15 years, more or less, really 2 decades. So they're a little bit pathetic, the Yemeni armed forces attached to the recognized government. Moreover, they were supported by the Saudis for a good number of years, about a decade ago, and that also failed to prevent the Houthis from taking over the capital, Sana'a, the critical port of Hodeidah, and emerge where they are now in control of half the country, and able to turn off and on, according to their whim, the Bab el Mandeb, which means traffic to the Suez Canal, and therefore they can cause great damage to Egypt and to the global economy. The Houthis are unacceptable. They are a tragedy for the people of Yemen. They've caused almost 500,000 deaths by disease and other means. I can only hope that a significant and effective coalition will arise against them. I do not think, to your direct question, that the recognized government of Yemen's armed forces, no matter what their current bluster, are up to the task. And therefore, realistically, it's going to require a broader coalition that would include Saudis, maybe the UAE if they can make up with the Saudis, because they're now at loggerheads over quibbles involving Yemen and other issues, the Egyptians, and possibly NATO and the US.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure as always speaking with you.